She's the United Nations Special Advisor for the World Food Programme. She was born in Zimbabwe, and Elizabeth has worked at the forefront of global development for over 2 decades now, improving the lives of underserved populations like she once was, and has held leadership roles at the World Bank, at the World Health Organization, at UNAIDS and UN Women. I Am a Girl from Africa is her first book. And what I'd like to do is, first of all, thank you for joining me, Elizabeth. Reading I Am a Girl from Africa with my book club, I was obviously incredibly moved by your story, as I'm sure anybody will be who reads your book. It really shows how the biggest challenges of our time and our lives may also present the biggest opportunities. It's why we started our foundation, Virgin Unite, to bring together people and entrepreneurial ideas to create opportunities for a better world. And I Am a Girl from Africa is a great reminder to see large-scale injustices not as impassable, but as opportunities for action. So first, I'd like to thank you for joining me ahead of Human Rights Day to talk about it. First thing I'd like to do is I spent half an hour trying to pronounce your surname, and in the end, I just decided I'm going to give up and just call you Elizabeth. I'm dyslexic, and they tried every trick to try to make it work. Could you please tell us exactly how to pronounce your surname?
So my last name is Nyamayaro, but Richard, it's perfectly fine for you to call me Elizabeth.
All right. Now, I just hope that when people go to buy the book, they're just going to have to say, "I'm a girl from Africa." I think will be sufficient because I don't think anybody's going to quite get their tongue around your surname. And you can't blame your parents because that came from generations down. So, so I always say to entrepreneurs who come to me wanting to start a business. You should start a business out of a personal challenge. And you started your humanitarian work, literally you took it out of a personal challenge. And do you mind just explaining what your personal challenge was all those years ago, and how it influenced you?
Well, first of all, Richard, thank you for having me. And I also want to say before we get started, a massive thank you from the bottom of my heart for doing this. One of my biggest highlights early this year was finding out that you had handpicked my book as part of the Literati Club. And it's not lost on me that you chose a book called I'm a Girl from Africa. And I have to say, I've had some of the most incredible letters from men, especially in the UK and the US and Australia as well, who've reached out to me and said, "Hey, I've just finished reading your book. I was so inspired. And the reason why I read your book is because I saw Richard Branson read it and I thought it was so cool." So I want to thank you for modeling such positive masculinity as well.
Thank you for that. But anyway, it's a wonderful book, and whether you're a girl or a guy, everybody should read it. But tell us a little, for those people who haven't read it yet. Can you go right back to the beginning and explain your struggles from early life?
Yeah, so I'm a Girl from Africa is really a book for anyone who's ever dared to dream big or wants to make a positive change in our world. It follows my own journey, chasing my dream against all odds, starting from the most humble of all circumstances, and really the perseverance that it took to achieve that dream, and some of the lessons that I learned along the way that have now enabled me as a humanitarian to try and make a better world and more equal world for all of us. But to take it from the very beginning, I grew up in a small village in Zimbabwe where I was raised by my gogo, my grandmother. And I grew up as part of a small, loving community. And just like your childhood, Richard, my life was surrounded with so much love that I never wanted for anything growing up. Unfortunately, though, when I turned 8 years old, an unexpected event devastated my village. We experienced the early shocks of climate change. I was 8 years old, and literally there was a severe drought that wiped out everything in my village. We were left with nothing to eat, nothing to drink, even our rivers dried up. And one day I was so weak from hunger because I hadn't eaten for a few days. I went and searched for food and realized that there was nothing left in the forest, and I collapsed on the ground. And I remember just going in and out of consciousness. I was drifting in and out. And I even said a prayer to God to just take me away because the pain was just so unbearable. And yet it was during this moment, right, when everything just felt so dire, everything felt so final. I thought I was going to die. And then this incredible thing happened. A fellow African who was a humanitarian with the United Nations found me. She gave me a bowl of porridge and saved my life. And it took a few years for me to realize who she was and what exactly she was there for. And that became my dream. I remember thinking, I want to be just like this girl. I too have to be a humanitarian, because I was now so determined to try and make a difference in the lives of others, because my own life had been saved, and that meant so much. So I liked what you said at the beginning, that, you know, oftentimes some of our most challenging moments in our lives also give us some of our greatest opportunity. And I'm grateful, right? This is a moment that could have been tragic for so many people, but for me, it gave my life purpose and a passion and a drive.
It's yeah, it's incredible. I've been to a wonderful women's factory outside Boston, a woman called Mrs. Salem, Naveen Salem, and she makes the porridge that is sent to Africa, and you know, if a baby's really starving, you know, what to give them the first day, second day, third day, fourth day, fifth day, sixth day, up to the 14th day, and you know, she has all these scientists working on it. And then sort of following that journey through to somebody like you who benefited from it, and is now doing so much good from your own personal experience. Anyway, I'm looking forward to showing her this video and telling her your story, because and one day you if you haven't met her, you should meet her, because she's also an extraordinary lady with the work they're doing. I think one of the most compelling parts for your story is literally how you went on to dedicate your life to really one goal so early on in your life. I'm not good at sticking with one goal, but it's such an important goal. And I think one of the exciting things about Africa is that is the way that a lot of these problems are slowly but surely, but thanks to people like yourself, being sorted. I mean, it's every decade, I think I'm right in saying, and you may correct me if I'm wrong, that less and less people are dying from disease, less and less people are dying from starvation, and yet obviously it still continues, and that there are still crises like what's going on in Ethiopia, which is just mind-bogglingly sad. I met the president of Ethiopia with the elders about 3 years ago and had lunch with him, and it really looked like he deserved his Nobel Prize, and yet now the whole country's falling apart. But tell could you are you hopeful about Africa, or what's your feeling? I mean, with that smile, you would have thought you have to be hopeful.
I'm absolutely hopeful. I think my continent of Africa is often misunderstood. We tend to focus on the single narrative of poverty, and we often forget that there is so much beauty. And first of all, and I know you know this, so I'm preaching to the choir when I say this, Richard, so it's really more for people listening, that we often look at Africa as a country. It is not a country. It is a continent of 55 independent countries, more than 1.2 billion people. We speak more than 2,000 languages. It's culturally rich and very diverse, and the progress across the continent is obviously as diverse as the continent itself. And so there's so much, great businesses coming out of Africa, innovation coming out of Africa. And so we tend to, I think mainstream media tends to focus on only the negative. I'm very hopeful. And as an African, I believe that, I have to play my part. And another motivation for writing the book as well is to really show people the Africa that I, as an African, know and love, right? A continent that is of people not defined by the enormity of our challenges, as I know you know, but by our resilience and strength in overcoming. And I think my own personal story, bringing it full circle to the book, is just one of many examples of how Africans persevere, how we are determined to make a better world for our own community and our own families. So I'm very hopeful about Africa.
No, I couldn't agree more. I think, in my lifetime, I've just seen so many hopeful things happen about Africa. And I think the latest breakthrough is a vaccination for malaria, which has been killing a million people per year.
Yeah.
There are things like lack of oxygen, which is still a major problem in Africa, which I hadn't, to be honest, really realized about until recently, and how many young kids and babies die because of that. And now, of course, with COVID, how many people are dying unnecessary deaths because of lack of oxygen. But slowly but surely, I think there are people, putting their minds trying to address as many of these issues as possible. In your book, you talk about, I think you call it shinga, which is your inner strength, and how you use it to conquer challenges. Do you mind telling me a little bit more about this way of thinking and how it shaped your life?
So Shinga is such a beautiful and a profound word in my language of Shona, which is the official language in Zimbabwe. And because it means so many things. It means your inner strength. It means to persevere, to be determined. And I learned this word from my gogo, my grandmother, during one of a very tragic moment, because 2 years after the first drought, another drought hit my village. And this time my gogo had to send me away for fear that I might die from lack of food in the village. And I was sent to live in the city with the rest of my family. But in this moment, I remember feeling just so broken. I felt so broken because I was about to leave everything that I'd ever known. I'd grown up in this small village, and my gogo had always been, in fact, I thought she was my mother initially. And so to be separated from her felt so just devastating. And she reminded me that we all have an inner shinga, this inner strength that enables us to overcome any obstacles that we might find in our lives. And I have to say that even now as a grown up, I rely a lot on my inner shinga. It enables me to, really run towards fear where most people run away from fear. It enables me to dare to take on challenges that might seem unsolvable to most people and just really have a go at it, right? And I know that you think in a similar way. But as an example, one of the key moments for me where I had to really rely on my inner shinga was the experience that happened to me in my early 20s. I decided that I was going to leave my African continent for the first time. I moved to the United Kingdom to pursue my dream to become a humanitarian. And I remember landing at Heathrow Airport. I had only 250 pounds to my name. I didn't know anyone at all in the UK. And like with any big dream, as you will know too, that often it's the case that life will throw so many curveballs your way. And this wonderful dream that I had moved to the UK to pursue just started falling apart, right? The UN actually did not have an office in London. What I thought was the UN office wasn't the UN office. I ran out of money. I almost became homeless in the UK because I couldn't afford the rent at this filthy youth hostel I was staying in Bayswater. But at this moment, all I had was this inner strength, and it became my mantra. Every morning I would chant to myself that I could do this. I could persevere and I could achieve my dream. And it took 3 years after I landed in London to achieve my dream. but I wouldn't have been able to do it without this belief that I had this inner Shinga. And I think most people underestimate their ability to overcome challenges, and they give up too quickly because they think it's too difficult. So it's a really beautiful and a powerful way of seeing life. And I also, Richard, I'm curious because I read your memoir and I loved everything about your mom and how she also taught you from a young age to be so independent, to be risk-taking, and you're probably one of the most risk-taking person I know. How were some of the lessons that you learned from her? You know, how have they shaped the decisions, the way that you make decisions today? Because you're very daring as well.
Yeah, you're not allowed to turn the questions on me today. But I think we're both optimists, and I think
Yeah.
that if you're an optimist, you set out there to make your optimism. If you're a
Yeah.
pessimist, you let things get you down. And so, I think for both of us, if something goes wrong, if there's nothing we can do about it, we'll put it behind us and we'll move forward in an optimistic way and just get out there and make our own optimism.
Yeah.
And you've done that in bucket loads. And I think your grandmother, I think most likely brought you up that way. And my mum and dad brought me up that way. And life is a lot more fun to be positive, to look, to be optimistic, to look for the positives in people, to do our absolute best to overcome strife. And
Yeah.
you've done that in bucket loads.
No, but I have to say as well, Richard, I think you win either way. You know, when you
Yeah,
take a risk, the best case scenario is that you are successful in your endeavor. But then on the flip side, even if you are not successful, you learn some of your biggest lessons through failure, right? You're able to look at those things and say, well, now I know how not to do this next time, or I now know that I need to tweak this in order to achieve that dream. So I think it's often
yeah.
the case that people feel overwhelmed and say, well, I will fail. But actually, even in failure, there's so much learning to do.
Can you give me an example in your book of overcoming a challenge? I mean, different from the ones you've already mentioned.
Yes. So what's a good example? I mean, there's so many of them.
For
I
sure.
think for I think for me, actually, one of the biggest, because it's easy to focus on, here's how I was successful. And it's really important, I think, if we are going to be vulnerable with the lessons that we have along this wonderful life called, journey called life, it's also important to share some of the moments when things didn't work out. And I think it's important for people to see that even people that then become successful, they've had some pitfalls along the way. And for me, the biggest one was actually when I finished my secondary school. I'd finally been given an opportunity to go to a really good school. And there was lots of expectation from my family that I would get a good job. And at the time, my country of Zimbabwe was experiencing such a job shortage. So there were so many educated people, young people like myself, who couldn't find a job. And I remember applying for so many jobs. Finally, I got this incredible opportunity to work for one of the biggest hotels in Zimbabwe. I showed up to the interview. I was as prepared as I could ever be. And it was going to pay me a lot of money, which I needed that money because I was also helping my parents pay school fees for my siblings. I have 3 of them. And in addition to that, I really was determined to find a way to save money to go to university so that I could become a humanitarian. So there was so much hanging on this opportunity. Sadly, I didn't get the job. And I was so devastated. It felt like the end of the world for me because the other option, which actually ended up being the reality, was I was working in a supermarket, selling soybeans because I was not able to get an office job. But all this to say, at the time, it felt just devastating. But at the same time, in retrospect, had I gotten that job, I would have been required to work every single day, 7 days a week, which should have impacted my ability to volunteer, because even when I was from the age of 14, I was volunteering at HIV/AIDS clinics in some of the most impoverished communities in my country. And that experience working at the HIV/AIDS clinic is actually, which was unpaid, by the way, what is the thing that actually enabled me to get my first job with the UN, because at the time I didn't have a university degree. And thankfully, I was able to sell my experience working with communities to get my foot into the door. So it actually was a win-win for me, because I would have not been able to make my dream come true had I gotten this wonderful job.
Well, we wouldn't be speaking today if you'd got that job. So
There you
we
go.
might have bumped into each other my next trip to Zimbabwe, but that's about it. So, I mean, I think you've sort of answered this, but and other people who are facing challenges in life are listening to this. What would your advice be to them?
So there's a beautiful African proverb, and something that my gogo always used to say to me, which is, however long the night, dawn always breaks. And whilst I can't speak on behalf of everyone, and I know that we experience pain in different ways, one thing I can say, and from my own personal experience as somebody who has endured some of the most difficult challenges, is that when you're in the moment, it really feels like nothing is going to get rid of your pain, or you fail to see the light at the end of the tunnel. And my reminder to everyone is that there is a life at the end of the tunnel. And in fact, sometimes these experiences, which we think are happening against us, actually happen for us, right? Because perhaps you're going through this in order for you to be able to then become an advocate for the issue that you're going through, because you know personally how personal and that experience is. For example, I'm sitting here today. I work for the UN World Food Program, working on ending global hunger. I know how to speak to it because I've experienced hunger, right? And I'm more passionate about it because I know what's at stake. I know that even today, hunger is still the leading cause of death in the world. A child dies every 4 seconds, Richard. 4 seconds, a child dies from hunger. And so I'm able to then be a vehicle for that message and to be part of creating change. So my advice is that, there is light at the end of the tunnel. And in fact, if at all possible, try and find and see the lessons in what you're going through, because there's always meaning in everything that happens to us, even though we might not recognize it at the time. It's preparing for something else. But I think another very simple way of trying to get over whatever pain you're going through, in the studies that have been done on this, is that find a way to give back to your community. When you do something good for other people, you often feel good about yourself as well. And it doesn't have to be too complicated. It could be a bowl of porridge that you give to a hungry child, and you might have another Elizabeth in your own community.
So true. However long the night, dawn always breaks. What a wonderful go you had. Did she live long enough to see your success? And did you manage to keep in touch with her?
Yes, she did. She did. And I know it's going to sound a little crazy, but even though my gogo is past, I feel her presence with me every single day. The lessons that she imparted and the wisdom that she imparted on me continue to guide me. So yes, I was able to actually get the job at the UN when she was still with us.
That's great. And she understood exactly what that meant, did she?
Oh, she did, Richard, because also, the other piece to being part of a community, we have this incredible Asian African wisdom, which I know you know very well because you're friends with Nelson Mandela and Desmond Tutu. This philosophy of Ubuntu, right? This ancient African wisdom that recognizes that we are all connected by our shared humanity, that we belong to each other and are responsible for each other. And so within this Ubuntu wisdom, there is also the way that we dream as Africans, right? A dream in the West is mostly for yourself. In the African context, a dream can be for one, for yourself, but it can be for many, right? And my gogo always used to say, you should dare to dream a dream for others. And this is what sparked, further sparked my desire to become a humanitarian. And so she was very proud because she knew that I dreamed a dream for others, that my ability to achieve my dream was also the opportunity for me to uplift my own community, my own African continent, and now the world. And so, yeah, she was very proud of that.
Well, you're too young to be an elder, but you speak like an elder, and the elders should keep their watchful eye on you for when you're a little older. It's rare to find humans like yourself on this earth these days. Um, so it's coming up to Human Rights Day. Can you share your thoughts on what that means? What that means to you?
What this means to me is a reminder, Richard, that none of us, first of all, equality is everyone's responsibility. Solving for it, trying to achieve a more equal world is everyone's responsibility, because none of us will ever be truly equal unless all of us are equal. Because there's going to be constant unrest. As long as one part of a society is oppressed, is experiencing injustice, none of us will ever be truly free and equal. So my hope, again, is for people to really understand and embrace this ancient African wisdom of Ubuntu, the recognition that, whether we like it or not, our common humanity binds us, connecting us to each other, no matter who you are or where you're from or what you believe, right? And we know that with Ubuntu, because of this connection, what impacts one of us will eventually impact all of us in different ways. And I think, if nothing at all, this current pandemic and this past year has really shown us that we are connected, and what impacts one part of the world ended up impacting all of us. And we now know that our ability to overcome is literally dependent on each other. As long as Richard is unwell, neither am I, right? None of us are well. And so it's a reminder for solidarity and allyship in solving for some of these big inequalities, that it's going to require all of us working together, working as a collective in order to achieve a more equal world, which, by the way, we all want to live in a much more equal world. We really do.
That's so true. Well, your story is utterly and completely remarkable, and I think it's a reminder to people that they can make a difference to the world around them. I mean, some maybe only a tiny little difference, others maybe a very large difference. I mean, the way I try and drive change is by drawing circles, and it's perhaps not quite as daft as it may sound. So I'll start by drawing a circle just around myself, and make sure that everything inside that circle is working well. Am I meeting my fitness goals? Am I looking after myself? Have I got my work-life balance? Am I drinking the right balance, and so on? And once I feel that that circle is fine, I then can widen that circle to include family and friends, and do everything I can to help them and make a difference there too. And then if you've got the width, you can widen that circle to include your community, as you've done, the environment, the world around you. To get on top of problems and seize opportunities. It's going to, I think, take as you said, everybody working together. I think you've given lots of great tips, but any other tips for individuals to make a difference in their lives?
No, absolutely. And just to piggyback on what you said, I really like the way that your view on how you organize yourself, as it were, because yes, we have to connect at both the personal level and the community level, because we belong to a community, and it's our responsibility to figure out a way to uplift the lives of those around us. And again, something that is core to my own upbringing in being part of a community is the understanding that when we uplift others, we in turn uplift ourselves, right? Because we're uplifting those communities. And so my biggest advice to anyone is to remind them that none of us are ever too small to make a difference. And in fact, the idea isn't to try and solve for everything as one person, because that can feel like boiling the ocean. The idea is to figure out the one small action that you can take. And I believe that if we all individually take these small actions, those small actions will culminate into big change. And for those people who feel quite overwhelmed about, I'm just too small, I'm not running a big company like Richard Branson, or I'm not a humanitarian like Elizabeth. I also want to share one of my favorite African proverbs, which goes as follows. If you think you're too small to make a difference, try spending a night in a room with a mosquito, right? It's just a reminder that none of us are ever too small to make a difference. And that's one thing I would encourage, just figure out what drives you, understand your why, right? At the core of everything that you do, you should really understand what drives you. And that will, again, fire your passion even more, because life is always going to throw so many difficult challenges and obstacles along your way. But if you understand your why, then you will never give up, right? You will never give up. And I think uplifting the lives of those around us is something that we can't give up on, because we need everyone involved to solve these pressing inequalities.
So true. They well, as I said, you're too young to become an elder or to be an elder yet. Um, there is another organization which is a young, sort of like a younger version of the elders, called the New Now, which has got a wonderful group of 12 people of your age who I think, a lot of them one day will be the future elders of this world. Uh, Although we had some involvement in setting it up, I have no say on who the new Now people are, but I'd love to put your name forward if you would allow me, and because you'd be a wonderful addition to this small group of really incredible people. Do I have your permission to at least to say that, as far as I'm concerned, if I was allowed to vote, I would vote?
I'm very humbled, Richard, and it would be such an honor, because we do, in my culture, we believe that to whom so much is given, so much is expected. And the reason why I get up every morning and do this work is because I know that so much has been given to me, and I want to dare to invent the future. We have to dare to invent the future. The status quo isn't working for anyone. We have rising inequalities. We have such injustice around race, around gender inequality. And, if I can play my part, however small it may be, it'll be such a great honor. So thank you again for this kind consideration.
And just to say to everybody listening, please read her beautiful book. Be inspired by it. I'm sure it will influence your lives. Elizabeth, your story is one that shows persistence, and shows persistence can be rewarded, and it shows the promise of wonderful progress. And just want to say thank you so much for inspiring us all. And I do like yellow. It's a lot more colourful and rewarding than what I'm wearing. I will be wearing yellow the next time I see you.
Thank you, Richard.
Lovely to talk to you.
But just very quickly, the significance of it, actually. It reminds me of this beautiful yellow skies I used to wake up to in my small village in Zimbabwe. And so it's my way of taking a piece of Africa with me.
Well, I know exactly what you mean. I was just with the Maasai in Kenya, and most beautiful people, and we've got a small lodge called Mahali, Missouri there, and Africa is just the most extraordinary place, and hopefully by the time you do become an elder, all the sort of final problems of Africa can be ticked off. Whether it's trachoma being wiped out, or whether it's nobody needing to starve anymore, or whether it's malaria being wiped out, or nobody dying from HIV anymore, or no more civil wars. Anyway, I'm sure between us all we can do our best to try to make sure that when you are a proper elder one day, that those kinds of problems are all behind you. But anyway, well done for moving in that direction.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Great. I see you.